Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHeroes. For those keeping count, this is episode 269, and we're going to talk about stress and burnout. And as an entrepreneur who's been doing this for almost 3 decades, I can relate to burnout. I mean, I fire myself just about every day, then I have to rehire myself because I'm so burned out with dealing with customers. But then again, I put most of them in my books, so. My next guest is Jessica Harrington, and we can stop her from laughing. She can say hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm glad you're here because this is gonna be fun.
For
And
sure, no, for sure.
I have my triple X vitamin water, which I rarely ever drink on this show. I always have my iced tea, so I'm already doing something different. But
Okay.
you know, I'll put the cap back on before I spill it on my lap. The you know, everybody who I've interviewed on this podcast has experienced burnout in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
And when I was in between companies, I used to own a cleaning company, and that's how I met Vance Morris, who was introduced us and was on a couple of the episodes. Um, but there was a time where I hated customers. As soon as that phone rang, I'm like, Jesus, do I have to answer the phone? And
Yeah.
and it people just were driving me crazy. And when I sold that business and devoted more time to coaching and consulting, I tried to find ways that were more beneficial for my health, my happiness. Working from home for the last over a decade helped alleviate a lot of that. Although now I'm doing chair exercises and I'm more of a keyboard warrior than I was doing physical work. And I think I need to bring that physical exercise back in to help, you know. So yeah, we could talk about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I kind of like what you said, like, especially with the customer service base, dealing with people is just stressful in general, right? Just
Mhm.
period, done. Everybody has their own personalities. Everyone's dealing with their own stressors. Everyone's just trying to figure it out on their own. And
Mhm.
so, like you said, just that customer base 101 right there is so stressful.
Mhm.
I spent 15 years in the restaurant industry, so I could totally hear you on the customer service base. I'm very big on we should either work in a retail or a restaurant, growing up. And I feel like we can kind of gauge some, respect and understanding when it comes to what you're dealing with when others are stressed out. And so I think that's just a really good point that we tend to get really frustrated when that email comes through, when that call comes through. And that's a clear sign that you're at your limit and that's burnout, right? And so what are you going to do next?
Back a lifetime ago, I guess when I was about 16, I worked at a video store, and the first time I experienced burnout, not from me, but from my manager, he had to take a whole month off, and he went to the hospital, mental checks, and all this other stuff. And they blamed it on midlife crisis. I'm like, oh shoot, the guy's only like 35 years old.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can blame everybody else for the problems that we have, but really, if we don't know how to deal with them, it becomes our problem.
Oh, for sure. And that's honestly why I
Mhm.
named the business journey to yourself because it's literally about yourself. It's how you
Mhm.
perceive a stressor. It's your reactions. It's how you handle it. Your communication, your boundaries, your time management. Right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to point the fingers. The customer is this, my boss this, my wife this, my kids this. Right? It's very easy to do that, but it's how about we would just like flip it a little bit and go, okay, what am I doing?
Mhm. Yeah, for me, writing books became my therapy. And the whole Rob versus series is my sarcastic take on dealing with scammers, lousy customer service, and what started out as one book in 2019, Rob versus the Scammers, has now led to 8 books now. And as of today, though, we've produced 43 books total in 10 years for not only ourselves but for our clients, and every one becomes a therapy session for me. It allows me to sit down and focus and look at what other people are writing about and how they're dealing with stuff. And and it's all about storytelling. And when we start to learn how to share those stories, we help educate somebody else on maybe it's not burnout, maybe it's not stress, maybe it's about a relationship, maybe it's about entrepreneurship, and
Yeah.
and and me listening to music every day in the morning when I come into my office. I put in some, I put on Queen or Weird Al or something that just gets me some juice going through my brain, and sometimes I dance a little bit, but you got to do something weird to break that funk that you could be in.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple things. So the first thing was like that storytelling. Well, first of all, finding what your therapy looks like, because we can sit here and be like, Jess, what do you do every day? But it might not work for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we get very stressed out of I did this, I did this, I did this. They
Hmm.
did not work. I
Right.
must be messed up. Right.
Mhm.
And so just kind of there's so many things you can do to reduce your stress. It's just figuring out what works for you, but also what works for that stressor. So I always say it's a toolbox. You might need a hammer, you might need a screwdriver, but you don't need both at the same time most
Yeah.
most time, right? So which one do you actually need? You also talked about like the storytelling, and I think that's really key because we tend to gossip, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but this is where my brain went. But
Hmm.
like that gossip piece. So when we're telling someone a story, whether it's it's in the book or you're just talking to your buddy at the bar or you're having a family function, when you're telling that story, you mentioned your storytelling was to educate, right? So
Hmm.
when you were telling your story in general in life situations, think about why you're telling that story, right? Because a lot your body doesn't know the difference if you are reliving that situation or not. So if I'm sitting like, oh my God, and then this happened, and I start to get sweaty. We all had like your face gets red and you start to yell a lot. Think about why you're telling that story.
Hmm.
Oh, someone cut me off today, but don't worry, I made it to work. Like I was a little late. I veered an accident. So think about how you're telling that story is really, really key.
Hmm. Yeah, it's and it's not about, if you read any of my Rob versus books, you don't see me actually sharing the people who piss me off. I don't share their names. I change them.
No,
I alter the story just a little bit so I protect the guilty. And but people are like, Rob, I need to know who this was. No, you don't.
no,
Just
you
just
don't.
just look at
Take the education piece out of it.
read the story. I said you're gonna it's and people come back and they're like, Rob, those books are so funny. I can picture myself in those situations. That's because you probably were in that situation.
For sure, because 'cause they're
Yeah,
realistic, right?
right.
They're
And
realistic.
and so but when it goes unchecked, if you don't know how to tell a story, you don't know how to vent, you don't know how to you know defunk yourself through music or writing or whatnot, maybe you go to a therapist. But here's the problem: when most therapists don't always get that big picture of yourself because you don't tell them. You're telling everybody
Yes.
else your story, but you don't want to tell the therapist your story. And now what? You're still broken.
Well, that and there's so many things, like, you kind of feel I love therapy, it's my undergrad, I'm not, but sometimes when some have gone to therapy, they feel like they're like, "Oh, well, they're gonna judge me." No, their job is literally to help you. You just tell them everything.
Right.
If you felt weird, if you did something wrong, quote unquote, if you needed support in a different way, the only way to work is if you're honest, right? So you have to be honest with yourself that we're not perfect and there's nothing wrong with not being perfect, but how you grow to the next level is by being honest and open, right?
Hmm.
So for sure.
Yeah, and I've always heard this. Well, not always, but over the last few years, I've consistently heard that ugly is the new beautiful, and that just doesn't mean that how you look. It means we all have a past that could be ugly. We all have these things that have we don't want to open that closet and show people our past. Why
Yeah.
not? Why not? Because everybody's got the same skeletons, regardless of what you think. Everybody's gone through shit. Share it,
Sure.
because
Because
once you get it off your shoulders and you realize that everybody else has gone through the same crap you are, you know, you're gonna lighten your load and feel so much better.
And it goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? So for your books, you're doing it for an education piece. So when you are telling that story, when you are letting that load, think about how you're telling that story and why you're telling it. Are you just having a microphone in your hand and shooting it to the like everybody? Or are you telling your best bud because you're going,
Right.
hey, this thought still sticks with me. I still think I'm not good enough. I still think I fail. I still think that I'm not going to get married. I still think these things because of XYZ past. So when I
Mhm,
start to have that conversation with somebody and they can see a different perspective on that story, or maybe go, hey, I went through that too. Let me tell you what I did that helped me. Right.
mhm. Yeah, and what I've learned on social media is that there are a lot of people out there that may never comment on what you do, but they will take what you have written at heart, and if it saves their life, eventually they're gonna come back and tell you. And so maybe you're making all these posts that are like, all sparkly and unicorns and rainbows, but that's not really you. And for me, the moment I started sharing my sarcastic stories, people are like, "Wow, Rob, that is so funny. I want to buy your books. I want to do this. I want to." And I'm like, had I not shared those, my personality, I would have never kind of built this business the way it is. Yeah, I wrote a whole bunch of great books, but they're not funny. The Rob versus books are funny, and it helps. Not only it helps me with therapy when I'm writing these books, because I'm remembering the stories every day I deal with somebody. I write down a story, and then I compile it.
Right.
And so which makes those books so much easier to write. And I put out about two a year. And people are like, well, Rob, I've read all these technical books to make myself better at what I do. I read your book, and an hour later I feel lightened, I feel happy, I feel, that like I should be doing what you're doing. No, you should be doing what
Wow.
you do, but use your personality to make it better.
Well, that's what it is. People want true people. They don't want the perfect picture. They just want you to be you.
Mhm.
Kind of to your point, I was just working with one of my clients the other day, and they send out an email, and they're doing the mortgage. So the next day the mortgage rates fluctuated, and he's like, oh, I made a mistake in my email. I said, then let them know.
Yeah.
People just want to know that you're going to own up on things and be honest. No one's perfect,
Yeah.
right? You just have to own up and just be you, because that's what people want, is just who you are. And because they'll align with that. That's your friends, that's your family, that's your coworkers, right? That's your clients. Everyone's going to align it with who you are. If you start to be someone you're not, then that's just being fake. And then nobody wants that either, right? So just be
Mhm.
who you are. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. There's nothing wrong with your past. It's just who you are and what you're doing with it today, right?
Yeah.
You also
And
mentioned, yeah.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to bring up, you said something earlier about like habits and how one of your habits is starting your morning with, music. And I
Mhm.
just wanted to like kind of make sure you touch on that, because I think it's really important. I don't think people, I call it the clock in and clock out list. So like, what's your clock in list, right? So, when you talked about working in the restaurant and clothing stores, right, in retail, is that there's always a clock in and clock out list. So what is yours? And so mine, I tell people, is when you get into your office, a lot of us are working from home now still, right? When you get into that office, what is it that you're doing? And so for you, the biggest thing I tell people is change that hat. So you're not a dad right now, you're not a husband right now, you're not, you know, whatever else right now. You're just the business owner, you're the manager, you're the employee, whatever that case may be. So I always recommend people, like you said, turn the music on. That's a good one. And just changing your clothes. It
Mhm.
sounds so silly, but especially with a lot of us working from home, put on that business outfit, whether it's just the top, it's fine. Have the slippers on. I'm not judging,
Yeah,
right?
I only have the top on. We're not gonna look
Stop.
at the I have jeans on.
Right. Just stop. And then when you get out, when you leave, when it's clock out time, now you're home.
Mhm.
So what's that change of clothes look like? Right. So is it leggings? Is it sweatpants? Is it gym wear? I don't care what it is, but changing, right? You're going to that next place. So that clock out. So I love that you have a clock in list.
Mhm. I mean, one of my fallback songs, always, if I'm feeling down, if I just feel like the world is just pushing me a little bit further than I want it to, the Grateful Dead, "Touch of Grey." And it's a song that I've heard since 1987 or 8, and it got me through college at Penn State. And it's just one of those fallback songs that it's got a great beat, but it's got a good message. And Queen, I think every song from Queen I play consistently, and my kids are like, Dad, please stop. Come to the 2000s. Wow, your music sucks in the 2000s. So no, no. Mm-mm.
But to your point, right? We all have that song that maybe helps us cry, maybe helps us get to excitement, and maybe helps us like we all have those songs. So again,
Mhm.
that's just another tool for you. So maybe that gets you started for your day, or that maybe that gets you started to the next moment in your life, or whatever that case may be. But what are those different tools that works for you? And that's really important that you have a variety of different music because again, not one's just going to be the sole answer.
Right. Now let's shift gears a little bit because
Yeah.
we've talked about all the things that we can do to unstress. However, that we're in a society now that likes to put blame on the past. So I see a lot of kids coming up into workplaces now, and they're like, "Well, I had a shitty, family. My childhood was awful. I got beat. I did drugs, blah, blah, blah," whatever. And they say they can't push forward in life until they take care of the past. Okay, well, I understand that. However, sometimes my response is just suck it up, buttercup, because you are an adult now. But, I can't say that all the time because society tells me, hey, Rob, you can't treat people like that. Well, you know.
And so there's a couple of things, right? Like you kind of mentioned in the beginning, we all have a past. No one's
Mhm,
growing up hunky dory and no one's not carrying things. So one of the things I usually tell people, this is like that when my work life balance educational workshop, I start to make visualize of everything that we're all carrying throughout the day, just the basics to do list. And then think about everything we have at home, from like the health issues to the family issues to and realizing how heavy things really get, but realizing that all of us are still showing up. So
mhm,
there's that understanding of, hey, I acknowledge you're going through life because we all do, right? None of us just skip through life saying peachy keen. Right. So, how are we doing that? But then also going, it's that mindfulness piece, right? So, how am I being here now? Because
mhm,
I can't change the past, right?
mhm,
I can't go back and tell mom and dad, this is how you're supposed to treat me. I can't tell that one teacher that, hey, you don't talk to kids that way. I can't do that. But what
mhm,
I can do is show up how I wanted others to show up for me. I can
mhm,
be that person. I can be that role model, right? I could start to learn those tools and habits on how I wanted to be treated and bring that to the present moment. But again, going back to what we were saying in the beginning, that's on me,
right.
right? Because a lot of times when we start to focus on the past too, we want these apologies. We want my mom and dad to say, like, I just want them to say sorry. Well, sorry isn't going to make the cut heal. It's
Mhm,
not. That heals over time, right? We all have different wounds. So letting that heal in its own time. But what does that look like for you? And that again, going back to that mindfulness, I'm at work today. Maybe I'm only 80% myself today. Maybe
mhm,
whatever something triggered me from before, and I'm only 80%. Well, guess what? I'm going to show up my full 80% then.
mhm,
Tomorrow I might be 99,
yeah.
but today I'm only 80. And there's nothing wrong with me only being 80, but I'm still going to show up that full 80%.
Well, the other day I made a post, and someone had commented that as entrepreneurs we're supposed to give 1,000% every day, and I'm like, no.
Realistic.
First of all, 100% is the max you can give, and even that's not realistic. And I said, look, if you can only give 1% every day, at least you're doing something.
It's about
Focus on that.
consistency.
Yeah.
It's about anything you work on, whether it's abs, whether it's diet, whether it's your life, whether cleaning the house, whatever it is, it's all about consistency, showing up every single day. So, what does that look like?
Mhm.
Right? What is your foundation of just showing up? Foundation is I'm going to drink my water today. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to shower. Right. So what is that foundation? Then it goes to your work. What's my foundation? Okay, I got to check my billing statements. I got to check with my clients. Whatever the case may be. At least you have that foundation, and that's where you start. I
Mhm.
think the other piece to it too is you're allowed to show up tired. A lot of times we're going, oh well, I'm tired. I'm going to curl up in bed. I'm going to have my mental health day. Again, I'm not discrediting that, but try it.
Mhm.
I always say set a timer, show up tired, right? So set a timer. Maybe I don't want to do a certain project. Set a timer for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
See what you can get done. No distractions, cell phones on do not disturb. You're not checking emails. You're just doing that one project for 20 minutes. If you can keep going, amazing. But if you can't, you attempted that 1% and maybe you got somewhere farther.
Right.
But again, it's just kind of we going back
Mhm.
to that example of the gym. I at least showed up at the gym Maybe I didn't do weights, but maybe I tried the treadmill and then I went home.
Right.
Right. But it's just that 1%. And what does that foundation look like?
Yeah, and I perceive that a lot of people, once they say I'm taking a mental health day, it makes it easier for them to take the next one and the next one and the next one. And then to the point where, the employer says, well, dude, you haven't come to work, so you're out. And then they're like so depressed now they don't have a job. Just show up. Just get some work done. You're gonna feel better because at least then you're accomplishing something. And you know, I- one of the things that I think that really had a bigger impact on me was, I read, I guess it was a couple years ago. First thing you do when you get up, make your bed. You've accomplished something. And once I did that, it was like, wow, okay, now I can go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it didn't feel like a chore. It felt like, you know, it's just consistent work that I'm doing.
And I think to your point, what you're trying to say too
Mhm.
is that kind of go back, like we don't need to make these big strides every day. And I think sometimes we start to feel overwhelmed. Again, you mentioned the social media, right? That everyone on social media is like, oh, I accomplished this $6 million thing and I'm working from the beach and I'm always happy. And that's just not realistic. So that's going back to the fake thing. But also, it's the small things that get you to the next step, right? We've
Right.
all read Tortoise in the Hare. We all see those little things where it's like it's the steps, not it's not a there's so many memes, but you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? It's small steps that get you there, right? And so it's thinking about those. And so it's going back to that. It's like, okay, to you on paper, it's just making the bed. But if I make my bed every single day, I now created a habit. Now when I'm doing the bed, I get up, I'm like, okay, I make the bed, I go to the kitchen and grab a glass of water. Now I have two habits every single day. So then it's like, that's my foundation that I'm creating.
Hmm.
So then when life gets hard, because life gets hard, I'm not going to discredit that. Life happens, like it gets challenging. I at least have a base and foundation of what I'm showing up for today.
Hmm.
I'll try to do things tired. If not, I still showed up in a way for me, that 1% you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So how did you get started in all this?
Yeah. So I started my career in education in the drug and alcohol field. So I was working at a local rehab with men reducing their sentence from jail coming into the rehab. I did that for a couple of years and absolutely loved it. Obviously, never a boring day, but I wanted to be on the prevention side of things. So I went back to school, got my master's in public health, or as you mentioned, master's in public happiness. Absolutely love it. Wrote it down. It's definitely my new hashtag. Um, and when I was there, that's really where I learned about you can create your own business, you can create your own programs. And that's when I started. I decided I want to start my business called Journey to Yourself. Like I was saying earlier, I'm really a big believer on it starts with me. Once I start to learn how to make myself happy, I'm able to decrease my stress because I learn how to say no. I learn how to communicate my needs and wants. And when I learn how to communicate my needs and wants, I can set those boundaries, right? I can start to decrease any of that BS in my life.
Yeah, I mean, boundaries are huge. And as when you're dealing with a lot of my clients are lawyers and doctors, and so my a lot of times my time doesn't jive with their free time. So they're calling me at all hours, and finally I stopped answering my phone. Although I do answer it for scammers because they go into my book and pay my bills. But um, the so I always tell them, I said, look, you have access to my text, you have access to WhatsApp, you have access to Facebook Messenger. Send me a message, send me an email. I'll respond when I respond. And they're like, oh, okay. I didn't know I could do that.
It's a communication piece, right? So there's a couple things you said there. I set boundaries, but I communicated those boundaries. Hey, I will answer my phone up to 7 p.m., 7:30 on the weekends. This is my hours. I'll get back to you. If it's an emergency, this is the best way to contact me, right? Because granted, neither one of us are heart surgeons, but maybe there's something going on, that we might need to know, or they might feel as an emergency. So then that's my where I can check and decide if it is an emergency, or I can at least communicate to them, hey, this will get me taken care of at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, whatever the case may be.
Oh,
But it's
I
that
have. I mean,
communication.
I've written lots of blog articles on heart surgery and personal injury attorney. So I could probably qualify for all those jobs, but nobody wants me working on their heart. Yeah, I'll probably just take this pen. Yeah, yeah.
No,
And
right? So it's that communication piece. And a lot of times for us to set that communication and set that boundaries, it takes a lot of us to build that self-love and self-confidence to
mm,
then start say, quote unquote, speak up, say, this is what I want, and there's nothing wrong with that.
right. Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those extroverts that will talk to people, and like I'll be in line at Disney World. I'll be in line talking to people, and my wife's like, "Who is that?" I don't know. I just talk.
Yeah.
I'll be in
Just
the grocery store talking to people, and you know, but for me, it was just natural because I love to be able to um, learn about other people.
yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Everyone has a
uh,
good story.
but but there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are introverts. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't even want to, if they could just sit behind their computer screen and not communicate with anybody, most of them would be like, "Yeah, this is great." But um,
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard to, when we find something that we really love and we're really good at, and we realize that as a business owner, that there's more to than just doing what you love and what you're good at.
yeah,
It
but
gets hard. It gets hard, right? And then, but that's also when you're talking about that introvert, going, okay, if it's not me, then who, right? And so
right,
there's a lot of who's out there that could do that next step level for you. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's again going back to understanding yourself and knowing what you need and want. So maybe you aren't that great networker and you don't love speaking on stage, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But who is and how you get that person into your world?
hmm yeah, it's I wasn't always this sarcastic, funny person, and I was an introvert. I didn't want to go to networking. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. To me, it was like I don't like these people. Who are, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes, just like anything else. And after a while, I was like, wow, okay, this is easy. But
And
you,
it's
you
kind
don't
of,
know that.
yeah, it's kind of going back to what we said about like every other habit. Start
Mhm.
small. Maybe it's one networking meeting a week, or maybe it's twice a month, and start there, and then build yourself up. Like, okay, in 3 months, I'm going to do once a week, and maybe after that, so it's just starting small. Remember, it's just a consistency. So if that's your part of your business where you want to work on, then how do you find it? If it's social media, maybe you're going, I don't want to be a video guy. That's fine. So maybe it's doing a video of something else of your work, and then you start talking over it, right? So it's just that build up, but it doesn't mean you can't get there. Everybody started somewhere. Look at
Yeah,
any business owner about where they started. Jeff Bezos, Gary Vee, right? All these people started in a really small shack. None of them
yeah,
said, okay, here's my $6 million house, right? They all started somewhere, but it was consistency that got them where they're at.
right. And let's talk about consistency because here I am. This is episode 269. I started out. I wasn't always as confident as I am now, and maybe the first 100 videos or 100 podcast episodes weren't the greatest. I had some good episodes though, but um, when we're making these videos, we all have these cameras, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, "Well, my hair's out of place. I don't sound right." Blah. Look, they're all excuses. Everybody else is making videos. Why aren't you? You know what? Stop the excuses. Just make a video, put it out there. If people don't like it, they're going to tell you. Well, they're going to probably tell you anyway. But the majority of them are going to say, look, I love what you said. I loved your message. Can I hire you? And so, my first 100 videos probably sucked. I know they did. Probably the first 1,000 of them probably did too. But nobody's really told me that after the first 100. So I got better.
But to your
Uh,
point, there's a couple things that you said, right? So showing up.
my videos suck. That's what I said.
No, no. But to your point is that it's showing up, and it's that practice, right? Baseball players, athletes, right? They don't just show up to the bat. They don't just show up on the field and they're great. They're consistently practicing. We even when it's not the season, they're still practicing, right? So even behind the scenes, they're still practicing so they can show up for the game. So to your point, is finding that one thing you want them to hear. So what's the message you want them to hear? All right. So mine is I want them to learn to let go of control. okay, so why don't I tell them that story of when I let go of control, right? So recently I had a surprise bridal shower and they said, and I was like, I gave up control. I let them take the place, pick the date. I didn't, it was a complete surprise for me, right? And so what does it feel like to give up control? I had to trust. I had to, all these things that happen. And like to your point a little bit earlier, is that I got emails from people going, okay, so I just tried what you said, right? And so,
Mhm.
but what is that one thing you want them to hear? So again, if you're going to do the video, maybe it's not of your face, but maybe it's you showing your action. So if you're building something, if you're typing on the computer, people love those ones, right?
Mhm.
What's it called? B videos, right? I think that's what they're called. Don't quote me on that. But you're like, they're showing the action. You can talk behind it. So you could still find a way to show up without you're like, oh, my hair is messy today. Okay, find an old picture, find an
Mhm.
old video, crop that. There's certain ways to do it. Is that you have to figure out what that way is.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client many, many years ago, and she overanalyzed everything. And it got to the point where I was getting calls every 10 minutes. Rob, I messed up. "Oh, do it again. Do it again. Do this. You know, bring the
Yes.
camera closer." She had the camera way far away. She said, "Well, then I can't see the teleprompter." I said, "Get rid of the teleprompter. Just wing it." "I can't wing it. I don't know what to do." After a while, I must have gotten 100 texts from her. I said, "Look, you're not ready." And she's like, "What do you mean I'm not ready?" I said, "Look, you have all the knowledge, but your brain is telling you you're not ready. Until your brain says you're ready, you're going to forget all these excuses and just do it."
And
About a month went by, and she finally sat down and did a video, and it was great.
And I think to your point, like if you don't trust yourself to make a video,
Hmm.
to show up on a podcast, to write a social media post, to go to a networking meeting, how are your clients supposed to trust you if you don't trust yourself?
Exactly.
And you kind of talked a little bit about this earlier about being who you are. Being who you are is how you attract your client.
Hmm.
And it sounds so cheesy, sounds so woo woo, but it's the only truth that you'll see. Consistency and just showing up for you. That is the way people get clients. That's the way people get the healthy consistency clients, right?
Hmm.
Just showing up for you. So if you don't trust yourself, your clients are not going to trust you.
Yeah, and it's not to be that we're trusting ourselves. We are. I mean, but we're not doing the whole Muhammad Ali. I am the best. No, just tell people exactly what you can do for them,
That's it.
and let them make that decision of if you're the best or not.
And that's on them.
Yeah, I see a lot of entrepreneurs going through the whole brag motion, and it's good. I mean, maybe that's that thing that pumps you up, but it kind of gives the audience a reason not to like you because you're so arrogant. Pull back a little bit, you know. Sometimes I just let people know, hey, I screwed up. This is what I did. This is how I fixed it, and they're like, great, I want to hire you.
People love those stories. People
Yeah.
love when they like. And that's what I was saying earlier about my client when he was like, "Oh, I made a mistake." Great. This is
Hmm.
a great way to show people who you are.
Hmm.
Let them know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So yeah,
So
all those things in the background there. You have a sign that says "I love you" and "breathe." So are those things that remind you every day that to
so
be?
yeah, there's does it say I love you? Where's the one? Oh, this one says I love you. I'm like, where am I? I'm like, which one says I love you? Yeah. Yeah, they're my degrees are up there. The one's written at Breathe. So I do a lot in the construction industry too. So they're all like cranes and stuff written in the word breathe. The other ones are like where I've traveled. I try to get building up my hiking. So I do a lot of like national I'm working on national parks and things like that. Yeah, it's good stuff. Brings a
Wow.
little bit of me in here.
Yeah, and so every office, every video that I've done, people are in their office. They all have their personality,
Oh yeah.
and you know, I like that because it gives me a reason to trust you guys. You know, hey, how can I refer you to somebody that I think is going to work wonders with you? because we don't want these clients that drag us down. And I started off talking about lousy customer service or lousy customers in general. And I think sometimes they're lousy because we didn't clarify the types of clients we're looking for.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
not to ourselves and not to the world out there. And so anybody's just calling and wasting our time. And
Yeah.
then it just gets to the point where, you know, we talked about boundaries, but we as entrepreneurs need to set those boundaries when it comes to our client avatar. Who do we want to attract? What is that one client that really brings us happiness? Let's get more of those. But we,
Yeah.
we forget, we like, well, I want everybody that breathes. Well, everybody that breathes doesn't have money. Everybody who, has money is not the ideal client because I've been offered a lot of money and those clients are assholes. And I've been offered a little bit of a little bit of money, and that client is just makes my life, you know, I feel like this is why I started this business.
Right.
So,
Right.
we set those boundaries to create that perfect avatar so that we're attracting happiness into our business and not wasting our time stressing out and getting burned out over clients that we don't want to serve.
And it's kind of like thinking about them as in like a relationship, right? Just
Mhm.
because, like, so for a woman, for example, you're not going to just go out with a man because he has money all the time, right? You're not going to, that's not the person, a healthy relationship. But the person that's genuinely good to you and treats you well, you're going to treat them well, right? So think of it also as like a significant other relationship. I think sometimes helps us too. And also with that mindset with like the clients, right? In the sense of, I'm not calling them every 2 minutes because if that was a significant other, I wouldn't want them calling me every 2 minutes. I wouldn't want to be in full control of everything if that was a client, if there was a significant other. So
Mhm.
sometimes if you switch your mindset to it being a relationship, it kind of helps you with that ideal client as well. This is a person I want to work with and be with. It kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah. So how do people find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, of course. So I always recommend my website, journeytoyourself.net. And basically on there, you'll find how I work with my educational workshops at businesses. I talk about my speaking engagements, my one-on-one coaching I provide for business owners as well. And then I have a podcast as well. So I talk about some
Nice.
stress habits on every Tuesday.
What's your podcast?
Stress less with me, Jess.
Nice. And you've been doing it pretty long?
I think almost 2 years. I think almost 2 years at this point.
Yeah, I've been doing this one 2018. So
Oh,
in,
wow. Yeah,
in January it'll be 6 years.
that's amazing.
Yeah. It's but we go back to consistency. We go back to, we do what we want to do, you know, and if I didn't want to do this podcast, it would have been gone a long time ago. And the average podcast, I think the average podcaster gets past, gets, what is it statistically saying that if they can get past the eighth episode, they'll do well.
Wow.
So, a lot of them don't make it past the eighth episode. So,
Yeah,
we've been doing pretty well, you and I, and we got a great audience that listens to our podcast, and we and hopefully they'll continue. So
for sure.
it's but there again, we have to have consistency. We have to have a belief in ourselves to continue to do this, and we have to have habits that keep our brain from kind of thinking that we're no good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that they overthink stuff, and then they're like, well, I'm not worthy of success.
Yeah, that mind things that we say to ourselves really take over our day. Because if I'm
Mhm.
saying I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, I'm going to look for reasons to validate that throughout the day. Oh, there's another reason why I'm stupid. I misspelled in the email. Oh, there's another reason I'm not good enough. The client said they have to wait till next week. There's another. We'll keep looking for those, but if I look for the ways of why consistency works, if I look for the ways why I'm a great leader, if I look for, that's what I'm going to look for.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what makes Jess a new hero, and I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Adios.
Bye.